I've been thinking, how do the laws get found when they don't know where to go? And I've been shaking, not many more twists and turns before I find the road. And I've been hoping for sunrise. I heard the dawn of hope can even light the way home. Just give me sunrise.
Welcome to the Purpose Podcast of Dr. Jazz, where I'm your host, Dr. Jazz, and we journey to purpose together. Thank you all for listening to yet another episode in season 4, where we are discussing purpose as an occupation. And today with me today, I have Miss Michelle Steiner. How are you, Michelle?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. We're recording this on a Monday. I know y'all listening to it on a Thursday, but it's been a Monday, Michelle. It's been a Monday, but
Oh,
it's
goodness.
okay. But it's okay. So as you all know, I usually just read our guest bio and we jump right in. So today will be no different. So who I have with me today, like I said, is Ms. Michelle Steiner, and she lives with an invisible disability. She has articles published on the Mighty Nonverbal Learning Project, Dyscalculia Blog, the Reluctant Spoonie, the Kalopina Collective, Imagine the World as One Magazine, and World Gathering. She has had her photographs featured in World Gathering and Independent and Work Ready, and she works as a paraeducator in a school with students with disabilities. She lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and 2 cats. Let's welcome Miss Michelle. How are you?
I am great. Thank
I'm glad
you.
that you are here. So as this podcast goes, our first question is always, what does purpose mean to you?
I think purpose means for me is living out that unique journey that each of us have in our life that we're given to do. And everybody has something different, but everybody just has this unique thing. And there's just that different why on why we do what we do. And just being able to go out and to be able to help the world and to be able to contribute that with that unique experience that each person will have.
So I heard you say a lot of words that get said on this podcast a lot:
Mhm.
journey, unique, the why behind it. So can you tell us a little more about your unique journey and your why behind what you believe your purpose to be?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I was diagnosed with a learning disability whenever I was in kindergarten. So, a lot of the work that I do when I work with students that have disabilities in the school or with writing at my own blog and just connecting with other people has a lot to do with my journey and my experience with that. As I said, I was diagnosed very young, and I can just remember being in the classroom and I was really struggling academically and socially, but mainly math was the big thing.
Mhm.
Counting, tying my shoes. I was my parents' first child, and they recommended that I get tested for having a learning disability. And it was no surprise to anybody that I had one. At that time, they didn't even call it dyscalculia. We knew about dyslexia, but they did know when I was 5 or 6, I was not going to be a math genius. We understood that. And I had to repeat kindergarten the following year in a different school. And it was just really difficult for me. I can remember having to get specialty instruction in all areas to start out with. And it just seemed like learning was really hard for me. All I wanted to do was learn, make my parents proud, which they always were. And it just seemed that was just so frustrating that I couldn't do it. And I can just remember feeling like really hopeless and thinking, well, what good can come out of this? And I was also struggling socially. My disability made me stick out like a sore thumb. I went to a very small school district where everybody knew that even after I was in regular ed classes, I went and had the test read aloud to me, or I had extended test time. And if I answered a question wrong, I soon got labeled the one that wasn't very smart in the room.
Mm.
So it was hard. And as I went throughout school, it got a lot easier for me academically. My grades improved. I was in all regular ed classes except for math and a resource room. Socially, it got a lot harder for me because the peer groups became more defined. And I really just was at that point where it was really difficult for me. And I can just remember thinking, okay, what good is going to come out of all this? And little did I know that the experiences that I went through is something I use in my everyday life. I knew that I wanted to go to college, but I had a professor, no, excuse me, I had a learning support teacher at the time that said, well, I don't think you can handle it because of your math. And she suggested a trade school because I always knew I wanted to go to college and I knew I wanted to help people. And I also love to read and to write. That's one of the things they found out I was good at. And I can remember just, I'm like, no, I want to go to college because nothing at trade school interested me. I got connected with the Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, and they also said, okay, we think college is feasible. I had to get tested for having a learning disability all over again. And what they found, my test scores have always been really low. And I had a psychiatrist who told me, well, you're most likely not going to go beyond community college. And that was really hard hearing that because I had dreams and I was already a little worried. I was not naive to the fact that this was going to be a struggle, especially with math. So I go into community college, and once again, I faced even more stigma. I had one of my advisors told me, well, you're going to have limited job choices because of math. I had a professor when I asked for using a calculator in class, the first one I had for math, telling me that we use our mind, not calculators in this class.
Oh, wow.
And I also had a lot of there was a lot of stigma with using disability accommodations on campus. So a lot of my peers thought they were cheating. So I didn't use them.
Really?
And that was a mistake. My grades really dropped. The grades that were already tanking were going even lower because I wasn't using the accommodations. And thankfully, I had a professor. I was struggling in her class, and she said, let's get you at least extended test time. And I did that, passed her class. I was able to pass my other classes. And after that, it was really, I was able to graduate with an associate's degree in early childhood education. I love being out on my own. And especially since I can't drive because of my disability, but I struggle with my purpose. I was really wondering, okay, where is this good purpose? Where's this good plan at? I mean, I wasn't seeing anybody, and I saw family members getting married, but I was happy with a lot of the stuff that was happening, like some of the temp jobs I was working at. And I always wanted more for myself. And be careful what you wish for, because due to financial reasons, I had to move back in with my parents. And I thought, this is the time to give university a try. And I found one of my relatives actually worked on campus, so she was able to give me a ride. I really researched a lot of different programs. I found one that had the least amount of math and science possible, had a program that interested me, and had disability accommodations. And this time when I went through, I'm like, I'm registering with the Office for Students with Disabilities, and I'm going to use them.
Yeah.
I had a note taker. I had extended test time. I did really well. And I advocated for myself. I talked to most of my professors, and I told them that I had a learning disability and this is what I needed. And that worked out so well for me. I did really good. I made Dean's List for a semester. My grades improved. It just was and I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree despite being told I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
After college, I also met my husband during that time, and we ended up getting married, and I got a job. It took me a while to find the right job. I still struggle with the purpose because a lot of the jobs said, oh, we're disability friendly, and they weren't. But I've been with my job with the school for over 13 years now, and I love it. I just can see that purpose because a lot of times it can be that my students will tell me, I hate having a disability and I wish I didn't have it. And I get that chance to tell them, well, it's not a bad thing to have a disability. And you are smart. And sometimes I wish I had that voice that was telling me that all those years. And I can just feel that purpose. And also another dream of mine that happened with writing was I got published.
Yeah.
I can remember my adult writing group that I started hanging out with when I was a teenager. They said, you should really write about having a learning disability. I said, oh no, that's too personal. But when I finally got the courage to write about it, there was a call on the mighty for what's a seemingly easy task that's for other people, but it's hard for you with your disability. And I wrote about how I couldn't unlock the door in my house because I have limited hand dexterity in both of my hands. And I can remember when that got published on the Mighty, I had a lot of people that were like, well, that's my story, or I can relate to.
Really?
A lot of people, especially on some other articles that I wrote. And I was like, this gave me that encouragement. I'm going to write more about having the disability. And that encouraged me to get published more articles. Other places I got published at. And I started my own blog called Michelle's Mission, where I write about life with a learning disability. And I also post my photography. As I said, I can't drive because of my disability, but I can notice details that other people will miss. And they'll say, you bring out those details in a flower. And I'll be in the car with my husband and I'll say, did you see that? And he'll be like, no, I'm focused on the road. But yeah. And when I'm on my walks, I get a chance to literally stop and smell the roses. And I get a chance to take a picture of a flower and be able to post that. And a lot of people really enjoy seeing that. And if I was driving, that's something that I would miss. And I just feel so much more empowered when I go out and I work on what I can do and what I'm good at, rather than, the things that I struggle with.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about, because twice you talked about like the things that you do like and the things that you are good at. And in your own life and even working with your students, how do you convey that, yes, I may be disabled in one area, but that does not mean that there is, because writing, you talked about writing and you talked about the fact that you don't drive being an asset. So how do you, like in your own life, how did you discover that? Because I know there had to be, like, your story is a story of triumph, but I know there had to be moments where, like you said, you were very frustrated as especially as a child,
Yes.
And I know there had to be moments where you had to switch from, I'm not going to worry about, not worry about, but I'm not going to focus on my disability, and I want to focus on the things that I'm good at. And in two times in two spaces in your own life, you were able to do that. So I want to talk about that switch for yourself, and also how do you help your students reframe is what it is, a reframing. So when did that happen for yourself, and how do you help your students? Those are the questions.
Okay, no, that's perfectly fine. When I started, I was a really negative person for a lot of years, especially during my early 20s. And it was when I went back to college and I started to do well in my classes and I focused on what I could do rather than what I couldn't do. And I used the services that were provided. That made me feel a lot better. And especially once I graduated, I think that was what I needed, because I felt like for so many years I tried chasing a cure for it. And I never found that. And that was okay. That's something I had to just make my peace with. That wasn't going to happen. But instead of finding that potion or that cure for something, what I ended up doing was I found that I could still be successful with it. I just had to find a way around it. And for me, that was going back to school. For me, that was getting things published and helping people. It was because I've had a lot of people say, well, why didn't you go out to be a certified teacher? If you could just get your act together, you could do that. And I've had to say, well, that wasn't a wise choice for myself. There are people with learning disabilities and other types of disabilities that make wonderful teachers. But for me, I knew that wasn't going to be the thing for me to be able to do that. And I also noticed whenever I stopped chasing that cure and I stopped chasing that desire to want to be fixed, that I found a lot more happiness, because I thought, okay, if you sit me in front of math, I'm going to be really frustrated. But if you give me my phone so I can take my picture, or you give me a book or something to write about, I can do that, or share my story. Those are things that I like to do. And I also think with my students, I really try to show them how to advocate. I have a lot of students that come in and they all know, do not ask me to help you with math. I'm not able to, or they're going to find out pretty quickly. This week's coming up. And that's okay. But I think that shows them too, that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to have something that you're not good at, because I think sometimes they look at us like we're gods and think, well, they must be good at everything. And in fact, we really aren't. Not everybody can do everything.
Mhm.
And I also show them how to advocate for themselves. Sometimes I'll have a student that'll say, well, I really need help, but I'm afraid to ask. And I say, well, it's okay. Here, I'll go with you. And soon enough, we have a student that isn't afraid to ask for help anymore.
Yeah.
They're independent and they're able to do that. And I think that's one of the greatest joys. I get a student at the beginning of the year that might be unsure about things. And by the end of the year, they're confident and they know what they need to do, because a lot of these skills that I'm showing them, especially advocacy, is so important because they're going to leave us, they're going to graduate,
Mhm.
but their disability isn't going to go away. And they really need to know how to ask for help and how to ask for things.
I love that. I love that in your own story, you were at least honest enough to say that I was a negative person. But
Mhm,
I I don't know, obviously, from personal
mhm,
experience, but I I can imagine, because I have situations in my life that last
mhm.
longer than I want them to, and I become
Right.
negative, about that
Mhm.
situation. And I could imagine if that situation never changed, the thought process and the mindset that comes along with that. So thank you for being honest, because a lot of people will make it seem like, that they're never down, or they're never, like it's just
Right, right.
like,
Yeah,
oh, I've always been okay. And like, no, you haven't. you know?
no, people haven't. I mean, there's certain things, and I'm really against people. Not that there's anything wrong with thinking positive or about
Yeah.
something, but I'm really, what I don't always like is toxic positivity, where everybody has to be
Oh
happy
my
about every.
goodness.
Yeah.
Go, I mean, keep going. Sorry, I wasn't trying to shut you off, but yes, I hate that. Like, you are not that happy all the time.
Right. There's times where things are going to make you sad, and that's
Yes.
okay that it does. But yeah,
Yes.
not everybody's always happy, and there's really no right or wrong way to feel. If I shove my fingers in a drawer, most likely I'm going to feel pain. I can't say, oh, this feels
Yes.
great, but I mean, I can't, but I can also control what I do with that situation. I can take the fingers out. I can yeah, I can look at them and say, okay, what does this need
Yes,
to
I'm so glad you said that, because I forgot that I was like, I know there's a term for it. I forgot that term, toxic
uh-huh.
positivity. Because there was a time in my life where I was like, this is something ain't right. Everybody not this happy all the time. Like something's not right. And I think that example of what you said about putting your hand in a drawer is a perfect example of that, because there are people who would leave that situation and say, oh, it's okay. No, it's not. Your hand is bruised.
Yep.
Like it's
Uh-huh.
okay for your hand to be bruised. So yeah, thank you for saying that. And to your students, I'm a professor by trade. I
Hmm.
do a lot of other
Awesome.
things, but I'm a professor by trade. And I also even have to tell my students, like, that don't have, that don't, like, you have to
Hmm.
advocate for yourself. There are students where I have to say, did you email me? Did you,
Yep.
like, you didn't come by my office, you didn't email me, so how was I supposed to know that
Yeah.
you were going through? Like, there was no, we didn't have a
Right.
conversation, so having, I think that is so important at any level for any student. So what, if you don't mind me asking, what age are you, like upper, middle,
I, I'm
high, or elementary?
I am what grade do I work with, or
Yeah.
what age? Yeah, I work with us. I'll be working with seventh graders.
Okay, yeah. So that's old enough to develop your sense of advocacy for
Yeah,
yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
I love that. I love that. So but they may not be old enough to deal with the negative self-talk. So is that something you help them with as well? Because you said you were in
Yes.
college, when you switched, because you
Yeah.
may not have had a Michelle to help you.
Right.
So how do you work with them in that?
Well, a lot of times I can hear them say, well, I'm stupid.
Oh,
Having dyslexia makes me stupid. I say, no, it doesn't. They
oh
said,
no,
yeah,
it
it does.
doesn't.
I said, no, your brain is just wired differently.
Hmm.
And you just have to figure different ways to be able to do this. And because nobody, of course, I have my parents to explained it in simple age appropriate terms,
Hmm.
but I didn't have a lot of staff members that I knew had a disability that were right in my class working
Hmm.
with me. And I didn't have a lot of representation. Mostly people that had disabilities were male and they struggled with reading. And I just didn't know anyone that really struggled with math. And I know some of my students do struggle with that. And that's where I can help them a little more too. But I think I get to be that voice. It just gets to counter that lie that just says, no, you're not stupid. Your brain's just wired differently. It's a little bit harder at times. You're going to have to find different ways to be able to do things. And I get to show them why some of these accommodations work. Especially they say, I don't want to go and have someone read a test aloud to me. And I can say, well, your brain just needs a little extra time. And I think there's also a respect too with a lot of my students. I had last year a student that we were trying to find the missing paper. And this was the big thing with some organizational skills. And he goes, I don't want anyone treating me like I'm different or like I'm not smart. And I finally said, all right. I wrote down the paper. Here's your list of things you need to find. You tell me when you find them or if you need my help. And the next day, he, of course, couldn't find the paper that he was looking for. And he said, Mrs. Steiner, can you help me find this? And it's just, I think, showing those skills. And I also try to put things in a lot of simple age appropriate terms too, because I'll get a student that will say, why do I need this? I'm never going to use this whenever I go, whenever I leave. And I say, well, I don't know if you're going to use it or you're not going to use it, but I'm giving you the skills, we're giving you the information, and what you decide you're going to do with it once you leave is really up to you. And I try to keep things very real with them too.
I love that. I love that you are taking the time to explain to your students. So do your students know that you have a disability as well? Is that something that you share with them?
I share with them in certain situations, but in other ones I don't. It just really depends on the situation. I might have said, sometimes it depends on the teacher I work with too. Sometimes we might just say, okay, yeah, Mrs. Steiner's not great with math, but she's the English guru. So go to her if you have that. But sometimes I do get that chance to really share that I have shared that I do have a disability, and that's why I can't do math or things are difficult too. And I think that can be really affirming to a student.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially, even if I don't say the word necessarily disability. I remember I was in a classroom and I had this kid that said, can you help me with my math? And I said, no, I can't do that. And then somebody asked, well, why can't you? And I said, oh, God just didn't give me that ability. And there was a little girl in the room and she goes, me too. And
I love that.
Yeah, and that was really affirming to somebody else that there are people that do struggle with that. And I think sometimes it's showing those limitations that all of us have.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you share your story with your students. Because I'm saying if you work with, a population, because I share I think I overshare with my students. I don't even think they care. But I share my life with my students as well. I feel like they be like, Dr. Wise, please, we don't care about what you did this weekend.
Yeah.
But I think it creates community, because I'm big on creating community classrooms. I believe that every classroom is a community before it is a learning environment. So because if you don't feel connected to me, you won't learn. I just believe that. So I love that. I love that you have the ability to share if you feel that it is appropriate. So going back to your definition of purpose, a part of it was also your why. And I mean, your why could seem obvious, but I want to make sure I know your why. So why? because I don't want to make assumptions. It might be something totally different than what I'm assuming. So what is the why of working with these students?
I want to be that person that makes a difference in their lives. That's my why. I want to help.
And that ain't what I thought.
Yep, I want to make that difference. I want to be that voice. I want to encourage them to do that. Yeah, and to just be that one that can be able to help them, because I understand where they're thinking. I can't speak for every single person or every single student that I have. Everyone will experience it differently, but I want to be that encouraging voice that I had I made a difference in their life, and I pointed them in the right direction. And I just love seeing the purpose that each one of them is going to come out into the world. And I really want to be somebody that's encouraging to them rather than discouraging that I experienced in my life.
So that's interesting. So you feel called to students. not necessarily students with disabilities.
I feel called to both, yes, but yeah,
Okay,
definitely
okay.
to students. But yes, students with
I love
disabilities
that.
always have that special place. And a lot of times, even if I'm in gen ed, I have students that are with disabilities that are already in the room, but we help out students that don't even have a diagnosis and they just might need a little extra help. I try to help out people like that, well, anybody that really needs that kind of help. And I also try to do that with people that might come and say, well, that's my story, or have that connection of other people. And I just want to be there to encourage and to help.
I love that. I love that because it's so easy to assume someone's purpose or their why. And I'm so glad I asked the question because I just assumed it was, I want to help people that are like me, and that's
Mhm.
not, I mean, that may be true, but that is not what you feel your purpose to be. So I love that. So when you think of this being a help to other students, are there other ways that it shows itself besides within the classroom? Like, are there volunteer opportunities or anything else that you seek out to pursue this purpose?
A lot of times I do have had other experiences. I have worked for a writing group. That's definitely
Mm,
something, a passion of mine that I pursue outside of that. And we meet once a month, 20 some years later. So that's something that I have. I've also done Sunday school with helping out with kids. That was a while
mm.
back, but I've done that. I also just look for a lot of different opportunities to be able to, just being able to share my story. That's a big thing too. And going on and with writing, I think that helps out as well. And just helping people. Just sometimes you might even just see someone that needs that encouragement. I get a lot of people, especially when I did public transportation, that would just sit there and tell me their story in life, and
Mm.
just listening to somebody and taking that patience, and just sometimes with other people in situations too, that can be a big thing. I also belong to a disability group where people do presentations and we have meetings, and I have done one on finding your voice through journaling, and it's sometimes just connecting with other people that have that as well too. There's a lot of great ways to be able to connect.
I love that because I believe that purpose for some people is very broad.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it is very narrow. And I love that you're describing a very broad experience, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I'm helping people, whether it's a conversation on public transportation, whether it's helping a student in the classroom, whether it's Sunday school, right, for a season,
Yeah.
that is what you feel like your purpose is. And I love to hear that because that is not, because there are so many people that listen to this podcast that are like, I don't know what it is. It could be this and it could be that. And I sometimes say it might be both, and it might be a season.
Yeah.
It might be this in this season and that in that season. So I love that it's tied to your occupation, but it's not your occupation. And I love to hear that. So let's talk about like your husband, because I want to bring him to the story because you brought him
Sure.
up. So we'll bring him into the story. So how does he help you pursue this purpose? How does he support you in this helping other people?
Definitely. Well, my husband has always been really great too, with rides. He gives me a ride to work in the morning, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful coworker that takes me home at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
He was an English major in college, so he is my favorite editor. I
I
will
love
sometimes,
that.
yeah. And he does that. We have a shared interest too. He goes to my writing group as well, and we actually met whenever I was volunteering at the art center, and unexpectedly, and he was playing guitar that night. So, and that's where we had our wedding reception, and ends up we had mutual friends. So there's that common interest that we have with each other too, that he's supportive along with a lot of that. And he has his interest as well, and we kind of just get that chance to work together.
I love that. I love that he supports you in that,
Mhm.
uh, in this pursuit of purpose,
Mhm.
whatever it looks like. Because it's important I'm not married, but for the married folks, what I hear is that it's important to be with someone that not necessarily has the same purpose as you, but that supports your purpose, especially if it's something that you feel called to do every day,
Yes.
all day. So I love that. I love that. I love that. Can we go back a little bit in your story and talk about your parents and how
Yes.
you, because I can imagine. I have a cousin that is deaf. She's not 100% deaf. She has hearing aids and it works.
Mhm.
But I do remember growing up, like the difficulties of communication sometimes, not always, but sometimes she was just ignoring us. If she listening to this
Yeah.
podcast, we know you were ignoring us, okay? But but like there's the difficulties of teaching a family, how to interact with someone that has some form or
Mhm.
level of disability. So can you tell us about that part of your story, how your parents interacted with you, how they interacted, you're the oldest, so your siblings, all that. How did that
Sure.
matriculate? Yeah.
Well, one of the things my parents, they never gave up on me.
I
They
love
were
it.
ones that just really supported me throughout all my years and advocated for me before I advocated for myself.
Mhm.
And they work with the school. And that is such a powerful message, though, that the school and the parents work together
Mhm.
with that and educate them. In fact, I got to run into my first learning support teacher, and I got to thank her for everything she did.
Oh.
Yeah. And she said, well, your mom and I really worked hard together. If she had a concern, she would call me. If I had a concern, I would call her, and we
Mhm.
both would work on making sure that you got what you needed.
Yeah.
And they went to every meeting that I had, and they explained things to me a lot in simple age appropriate terms with having a disability, that I had
Mhm.
a learning disability and I learned differently. And hearing that was so powerful because my peers were telling me things that weren't true, that I wasn't very smart.
Mhm.
And but I had that advice, and we spent a lot of long tearful homework sessions together because it,
Mhm.
it was frustrating for them too. I was their first child navigating through having this, and the school also educated them and said, look, just make sure she does the best she can do. Don't punish her if her grades don't drop. And that was always the thing, that if, as long as I tried my best, it was okay if I didn't do well in a class. It was all right if I didn't do well on a test, but I had to put forth the effort. And I think with communicating with my brother, I just have one other sibling, that's my brother,
Mhm.
and they were on a lot of alert with that whenever he went into school. That was the big thing that they were looking towards. Did this get passed on in the family? Does he have one? And my brother didn't have that.
Mhm.
But it's having that awareness too, especially with my nieces. He's married with I have two wonderful nieces, and he would even ask me when both of the girls were little, they would make their sixes and their nines backwards. And
Mhm.
he said, is that dyslexia? And I said, well, I don't necessarily think that is. I think that's probably just a developmental phase. But if you have any concerns, to talk to the teacher. And they seem to be doing good. The one will be going to kindergarten coming up in a few
Mhm.
days, and the other one will be in fourth grade this year. So, but that became, a focus on what, okay, things to just be able to look for, and an understanding too that my parents wouldn't have had if I didn't have the disability that I do.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. That's what I hear is like the support. And I think when it
Mhm.
comes to purpose, not everybody has that. Not everybody has the
Right.
support. Not everybody has people who are
Mhm.
advocating for them. So I love that. Were you given an IEP, an individual education plan? Is that okay?
Yes, I was given an IEP whenever I was in kindergarten, very early. So that was a
Okay, yeah.
really good, yeah, definitely. It
Yeah.
was good. And it just becomes one of those things you just learn that this is just a part of your
Mhm.
journey. And uh, whenever I did go to college, of course, we don't have IEPs, but
No.
I had to be the one that had to advocate. And once I learned how to do that and I got past a lot of the stigma, I found it to be so much easier for me.
How do you work with stigma with your students?
That can be really hard too. I but I've developed that confidence in myself that I'm okay with it. Because sometimes I'll get a smart aleck kid that'll say, after you tell them I can't help you with math, can you help me with my math? And I
Mm-hmm.
could just honestly smile with them and say, well, nope, can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I also had a student that once looked at me and said, don't you wish you were a real teacher? And I
Oh,
said,
wow. Kids
you
are
know,
mean.
they
Sorry.
are. I do
Kids
work with
are
some
mean.
students that can be like that. And to tell you the truth, I could honestly look at them and I didn't feel bad because whenever I told them, I said, I'm really happy with my job. And I felt that because I am content for what it is. I've made my peace with my life. And when I stopped looking for that cure and I accepted who I was,
Mm-hmm.
and I had that confidence and that feeling of purpose that it would literally change who I was if I could teach math or I could drive. That
That's
would change.
true.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd want to change that part of me, but I had to go through that piece to be able to handle that. I think one of the hardest parts though is when I do work with students and I have a separate condition. My feet turn in when I walk. So, and I mean, I'm fine with that. I've had the surgery. I'm okay. I mean, it hasn't worked, but what it was really hard though is when people will sometimes make comments with that is trying to figure out, just with that. And I made my peace with it. I mean, it's a
Mm-hmm.
part of my life, but that's a little harder for me sometimes. And I just have to remember that this is who I am and it's okay. And I've done what I can do. And that's just part of my purpose.
So this may be a personal question you don't have to answer, but is it difference because that is something that people see and because
Mhm.
we all know the
Yes.
little kid that points
Yeah.
and says, Mom, what's wrong with them? And you have to say, baby, there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah,
Like, are they a little bit
exactly.
different? So is that the difference where it's like a
Yes.
scene? Okay.
A scene, right, a scene. And because for so many years, the emphasis was on what you couldn't see,
Mm-hmm.
that I couldn't do. People can't see where I struggle like with the math and,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm okay if someone has a question. I'll answer whatever question, but I just have to make sure that it's done in a respectful manner
Yeah,
too,
most
that other
definitely.
people, yeah. And even with my hand dexterity, people are arguing sometimes they can see that. Last year I was in the grocery store and I'm unloading my cart and it probably looks a lot different than what somebody else would do. And I had a woman come up behind me and she starts talking with me and then she starts unloading my cart. And I said, oh, thank you. And she goes, yeah, I like to help people and you look like you really need the help. So that's been a different
Oh,
thing that
wow.
the things that people can see and are saying things because sometimes I have a perception of what I am and what I'm doing, and other people look at it and that may not match what they think looks normal. I even had somebody at the gym the other day that said, I'm really glad that I'm not the only one that can't do certain things. And I'm like,
Wow.
I do what I can do, and it's
People
hard.
say some stuff.
They do. And I think it's just this, it comes back to the same point with the stigma. I can't control whether someone's going to comment on something that might be the thing that is visible
Mm-hmm.
or the thing that's not, or what I'm doing. But I have to look at my purpose in life isn't necessarily to make them happy, it's to fulfill the purpose in front of me and just to have that confidence. So I'm slowly learning that in my other areas too
Yeah.
in my life.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
a journey, right? Like you talked
Right.
about earlier, like it is a journey to I feel
Hmm.
like our whole lives we're working, which
Yeah.
we tell little kids that we be lying to them. We be telling them that like once they get an adult, they change. That's not true if you're a child,
No.
a young person listening to this. But okay, that's cool to not cool, but I understand what you're
Mhm.
saying of like the the invisible disability you have come to terms with, and the other two, not that you're
Yeah.
uncomfortable, it's just they're seen and people
Yep.
say
Yeah.
crazy.
And to answer that, exactly. That's our,
People are going to say stuff, and
yeah.
and
People
that
are. Mhm.
and having to deal with that. Are those the type of lessons that you speak to your students about? Like, do you speak to them about, hey, people are going to say something, or is that something like how much are life lessons from your personal experience a part of what you do? That's the
I
question I'm
think,
trying to
I
ask.
think a lot of times what I will put into there is whenever I hear them not being kind to other people that have disabilities or things, I'm the one that usually speaks up. And then that's like, well, what's wrong with saying that? I'm like, well, if that isn't very kind, because there are people that might have an intellectual disability. So if you're going to use it in a derogatory term, that can really offend somebody if you use that. And you can think whatever you want in your head, just don't say that out loud. And sometimes I do ask questions. I had one that she was asking what an intellectual disability was, because they have this program where they have to figure out what they would like to do in life, and they try to match them up, like what their purpose is. And one of them was, oh, working with people with intellectual disabilities. So I explained to this girl what one was. And sometimes especially students who I know are in the classroom, like if they start to say things like, well, that's autistic or something, like, well, we have people in the classroom that have autism. It's not nice. And I try to really call out a lot of things that when people do say things that aren't very kind, so at least they have that understanding to do that.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that you use your knowledge, and I love that you also don't center your disability, because I think there's a mind shift in that. I think there are some people, when you're grappling with it, again, I don't have this, but I've seen it where it becomes their identity, but then you shift into, no, I'm a writer. No, I'm a paraeducation education teacher.
Paraprofessional. That's okay.
Trying to say, I'm a para is what I really would say. And that shift of, I can use my life experiences to help other people, because I talk about quite often how English is actually not. I'm the opposite. Actually, there was a time in my life where which I know you're not supposed to do, I diagnosed myself with dyslexia, because I was like, something has to not be right, which if I do, it's very low on the scale. If there's a scale, I'm very low on it, but I struggled a lot, and I speak often about how my first F was on a spelling test. And English was, I remember in high school, I was the only person who had to take my English final, because the way you get out of finals in high school was having an A in the class. I was the only one who didn't have an A in the class.
Oh, no.
So I had to take the final. I was there by myself. I still, Miss Brooks, you could have let me out of there. I begged her. It was like my senior year. I was like, please don't make me take this final. But anyway, so I understand not like saying, hey, this is not a strength for me. But what I'm really good at is, like I said, the opposite of you. I'm actually really good at math, and I'm really good at science, and playing to the thing that I excel at, and using that part of my brain. So that was an identity shift even for myself. Even when I got into graduate school, I cried because I was like, I had to write a dissertation and I can't write. Like that was I literally got and was like boo-hoo crying, because I was like, how am I going to graduate? So I definitely understand. I understand that my, I don't want to say weaknesses, but the things that I'm not as good at, having to reframe myself and reframe the way I see the world and reframe things to play up my strengths. I was lucky enough to go to a graduate program that was heavy stats, right? So I actually, I was good until I had to write my dissertation. Because it was such a stat heavy graduate program. But those things, I think that's a part of life, is that things work out when you change your view, which is something that you've talked about a few times on this podcast, of like changing your view, changing your vision, so that you can see the good, so that you can see the thing, you can see that writing is my thing, and that is what I excel at, and I can lean into that instead of leaning into the things that I'm not good at, that are I love that. I love that part of your story. So my next to last question is, succinctly, if somebody walked up to you, which probably they never will do, and they said, Michelle, what is your purpose? Like, what would that answer be, very succinctly? That's my
I think what I would probably say my purpose is to be able to help other people in life, whether that's working in a classroom with students that are struggling, or that's helping somebody that has a disability, or even being a parent that's going through their child being diagnosed with that. But it's just trying to help somebody in whatever capacity that I can for the day.
I love that. But now I have a follow-up question. That's not my last question. How do you know when not to help somebody? Do you know?
I think sometimes that definitely asking can sometimes be that. Sometimes
Mm,
maybe helping somebody, if I know that I'm not skilled to do that, can be a big thing too. I think that's a big thing. Obviously, you got someone with math, I can't help, and I know
mhm,
that. But I also think sometimes if I don't feel safe or the situation doesn't feel
mm.
safe, that's always a good thing too. And I think it's just having that discernment on what to walk away from. And also, if somebody says, no, thank you, I don't want to have help, well, we can't help someone that doesn't want that as well. And I just think it's trusting my intuition on that, and just making sure that, I'm discerning from that.
Okay, cool. Because you said every day, and I'm like, man, do I seek to do stuff every day? Now that's why I was wondering what that was. So every day you seek to help someone. I
Mhm.
love that. Yeah.
And sometimes, though, I may not be able to do that too. There's other things that maybe I have to attend to, or some other things that happen too. But I think sometimes it's just trying to be intentional, and just to see, well, what's a way that I can help and serve.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. And then my last question is always, if people get nothing else from this episode, they've listened to us and we've talked and we've said a lot
Mhm.
of great things. What do you want them to leave here with?
I want people to leave with knowing what they want, and being able to find a way to do that, and to just seek out what their purpose is in life.
I love that. Thank you for being here, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. This is another episode of the Purpose Podcast of Dr. Jazz, where we journey to purpose together. And again, we will see y'all in 2 weeks. So don't come back next week looking for another episode. 2 weeks. And remember, you can send us a text message. We do respond. I'll talk to y'all later.